"You can't afford this place," my brothers sneered as my family laughed, all of them so sure of who they thought I was. They had no idea their words were bouncing off the walls of a hotel I built with my own hands. But I stayed quiet, letting them enjoy their joke a little longer. My name is Sloan Whitlock, and in my family, value is measured by credit scores, luxury cars, and how loudly you can brag at a dinner table. Carson, my brother, loved showing off the most. He'd just closed a big deal and booked the most expensive suite at the Celestine, a hotel people waited months to enter. He invited me only to remind me I didn't belong in his world. My parents admired the artwork in the lobby, and Gemma checked my simple shoes with pity. Carson leaned toward me with a smirk and warned me not to even think about room service. They all laughed like it was harmless fun. It wasn't. Their arrogance had a long history. Years ago, after I graduated, my fiancé Preston and my best friend Tessa stole my business plan and ran off together, romantically and professionally. I was left with nothing but heartbreak and a small inheritance from my great-aunt Marigold. My family assumed I failed because I disappeared for a while, but they never knew I used Marigold's last name, Vance, to rebuild my life in silence. With her money, I bought a broken-down lodge in Oregon. I cleaned, repaired, and restored it myself. When guests finally came, they loved it. The revenue allowed me to buy a lighthouse in Maine. Slowly, Vance Retreats became a name people whispered with awe. The Celestine became my crown jewel, hidden behind layers of corporations so no one would trace it back to me. Only my partner Silas and my manager, Mr. Point Aldridge, knew the truth, but my family saw me as the quiet, unimportant sister. At dinner that weekend, Carson lectured me about real wealth. Gemma suggested I get a job as a concierge. My mother worried I wasn't building a legacy. I stayed calm, letting them talk. The next morning, Gemma admired an article praising the mysterious owner of Vance Retreats without realizing she was sitting across from her. By the pool, the final blow came. Gemma said my life must be easy because I had no expectations. I felt something in me settle. I was done letting them speak over me. That evening, in the lounge, Carson mocked me again about budget motels. I looked at Mr. Firsting, Aldridge, who understood the signal. He approached us smoothly. Carson assumed he was there to deal with his complaint. But Mr. Aldridge stopped in front of me and bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Vance," he said loudly, "your private residence is ready. Should I place your family's charges on the corporate account, or will you be handling them personally?" The room went silent. My family froze, staring at me like they were seeing a ghost. "No courtesy," I said. "Full rate." I stood, took Silas's hand, and walked through the private door meant for the owner. I didn't look back. Their shock wasn't my victory, my peace was. They finally saw the truth, and I finally walked free. 7 years before that weekend at the Celestine, everything in my life fell apart at once. It happened right after my graduation, at a time when I believed my future was steady and safe. Preston, the man I planned to marry, and Tessa, the friend I trusted since childhood, proved me wrong in the cruelest way. I had spent months building an idea for a small travel business, simple, personal, and built from the things I loved. While I was celebrating finishing school, they quietly took everything I created. One morning, I woke up to find their phones switched off, their apartments empty, and a message saying they had decided to partner together. Partner. That was the word they used to excuse every lie. They combined my work with their own plans, launched my project as their brand, and disappeared to another state. They didn't just leave as a couple, they left with something I poured my heart into. I had nothing to fight them with, no resources, no strength, and no one in my family who understood what that loss meant to me. My parents didn't take it seriously. My siblings treated the whole thing like a reminder that I wasn't tough enough for the real world. They thought betrayal was something people move on from in a week. To them, I was just being dramatic. They couldn't see how deeply that moment broke me, how it made me question everything I believed about loyalty and love. The only person who noticed my pain was my great-aunt Marigold, a quiet woman who never tried to fit into the family's loud world. She didn't give speeches or offer empty comfort. Instead, she handed me a small envelope. Inside, it was a check for $120,000, the last of her savings. She simply said, "Start again somewhere they can't reach you." It was the first time I felt someone truly believed in me. I didn't tell anyone where I went. I left my old phone behind, packed a single bag, and drove until the road felt unfamiliar. My family assumed I ran away because I couldn't handle life. They whispered that I was wasting time, that I would come back begging for help. They never imagined I was starting a new life on purpose. To distance myself from everything connected to Preston and Tessa, I stopped using the name Whitlock in business. Instead, I took Marigold's surname, Vance. It felt right. It reminded me of the only person who stood by me when everything else collapsed. With that name, I rented a tiny cabin and worked until I could breathe again. I researched old properties, talked to locals, watched how small businesses survived. For the first time, I wasn't building something for approval or praise. I was building something for myself. What they stole from me hurt, but it wasn't the end. It was the moment that pushed me into the life I was meant to create, a life no one in my family imagined I was capable of. The money my great-aunt left me wasn't enough to build a big company, but it was enough to take one bold step. I used it to buy an old mountain lodge in Oregon, a place most people would have walked away from. The roof leaked, the floors sagged, and the walls carried years of dust and neglect. But the building felt honest. It didn't pretend to be perfect, and at that time, neither did I. I couldn't afford a team, so I did everything myself. I scrubbed floors in the morning, fixed broken pipes in the afternoon, and learned accounting at night. I painted every room, cleared out overgrown paths, and repaired anything I could figure out. The lodge slowly started to change, and with it, I did too. It became a place where I could work quietly, without anyone's judgment or noise. There were no comments about my choices, no reminders of what I had lost. Just steady progress, one task at a time. When the lodge finally opened, I expected a slow start. Instead, travelers who stumbled upon it wrote kind reviews, mentioning the peaceful setting and thoughtful touches. A few travel writers visited without revealing who they were, and their praise brought more guests. The income wasn't huge, but it was enough to start thinking about the future again. After a couple of seasons, I bought another forgotten property, an old lighthouse on the Maine coast. Its exterior was weathered by storms, but the structure was strong. I turned it into a retreat with warm rooms, quiet reading corners, and views that made people stop talking mid-sentence. Guests said the place felt like it knew how to breathe for them. That comment stayed with me because it was exactly what I wanted to create, spaces where people could rest without feeling judged or rushed. As more visitors came, the name Vance Retreats started appearing online. People described the places as hidden gems and quiet treasures. They didn't know who owned them, but they felt a sense of care behind each detail. That anonymity gave me freedom. I could build without my family's eyes on me, without anyone connecting me to my past. With 2 successful locations, I felt ready for something bolder. I wanted to step into a real market, a place known for its high expectations. That's when I found the property that would become the Celestine. It was expensive and risky, but I believed in the vision. I created several holding companies to keep my identity hidden. I didn't want attention, just space to work and grow. During construction, I met Silas, a landscape architect who understood beauty in a quiet way. He designed gardens that matched the mood of the hotel, calm, thoughtful, and welcoming. He became more than a collaborator. He became the person who stood beside me without questioning my path. Mr. Perding, Aldridge, disciplined and steady, managed the operations and protected my privacy. Only those 2 men knew the truth. The Celestine wasn't someone else's dream. It was mine, built from the quiet climb I made when everyone assumed I had disappeared into failure. The first evening at the Celestine felt longer than it should have. We were seated beside the glass wall that overlooked the ocean, waves rising and falling beneath us like a slow, steady reminder of how far I'd come. But across the table, my family kept talking as if I were still the person they remembered, someone small, someone who needed their advice to survive. Carson took control of the conversation the way he always did, speaking loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. He waved his steak knife while explaining different types of wealth, as if he were giving a lecture. He spoke about investments and mergers, pausing only to check whether I was following. Every few minutes, he tossed a comment in my direction, reminding me that money was more than basic savings. He enjoyed acting like the expert, and the rest of the family let him. Gemma added her part with a smile that never reached her eyes. She suggested I apply for a job as a concierge, saying I might meet useful people if I tried harder. She made it sound like she was doing me a favor. She had no idea how many people I had hired, how many teams worked under the Vance name. She only saw the version of me she liked, harmless, predictable, and beneath her. My mother, Vivian, chose softer words, but they carried the same message. She leaned forward, squeezed my hand gently, and said they only wanted me to think about my future. According to her, she didn't want me to reach an age where I regretted not building something that lasts. She meant well in her own way, but her concern was shaped by the world she lived in, a world where legacy was measured by luxury, not character. I listened quietly. I didn't correct them, argue with them, or try to impress them. They had built a picture of me in their minds, and nothing I said would change it. They didn't come here to understand me. They came here to show me what they believed I lacked. Their opinions no longer hurt, but their certainty was exhausting. Silas sat beside me, calm as always. He didn't interrupt or defend me because he knew I didn't need rescuing. Instead, he pulled a napkin toward him and began sketching little shapes, curves, lines, patterns that often turned into ideas for garden designs. It was his way of staying patient. Every so often, he nudged the napkin my way, letting me see what he had drawn. It helped more than he realized. While they talked, I kept my expression neutral, and my answers short. I didn't react to the subtle jabs or the assumptions. I simply let their words pass through me. They were performing, not communicating, and I wasn't interested in joining their show. The truth sat quietly inside me, steady and unshaken. They were dining in a place they believed belonged to strangers, unaware that the walls around them, the view before them, and the very experience they were praising existed because of the person they dismissed at this table. And the moment would come soon, when that truth would no longer stay hidden. The next morning, the sunlight filled the breakfast room, but the mood at the table felt strangely off. Everyone was speaking in low, excited tones, and for once, none of it had anything to do with me. Gemma was glued to her phone, scrolling with the kind of focus she never used for anything serious. Her eyes were shining, as if she had discovered something life-changing. She let out a loud gasp. "Carson, look at this. This article about the owner of Vance Retreats is everywhere. No one knows who they are, but whoever built this brand is brilliant." She pushed her phone toward him like she was presenting evidence of a miracle. "You should try to connect with them. People say they turned forgotten places into luxury destinations. Total genius." Carson leaned back, suddenly interested. He always perked up when something involved power or influence. He adjusted his watch, a habit he had when he wanted to look more important, and nodded thoughtfully. "Now that," he said, tapping the screen, "is someone who knows what they're doing. That's the kind of person I respect. Sharp mind, smart strategy. We could have a productive conversation." He said it like he was planning to give this mysterious owner a gift by allowing them to meet him. I almost laughed, but I kept a steady face. Silas glanced at me, and a tiny smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. He lowered his gaze to his coffee cup to hide it. The whole scene felt like a quiet joke between us, a joke my family didn't realize they were performing. As they continued discussing the article, they spoke about Vance Retreats as if the owner were some distant legend. They admired the creativity, the attention to detail, the way each property had its own character and calm. They praised the person's vision, their management skills, and their ability to build something respected without chasing fame. They were impressed by everything they believed I lacked. My father, Franklin, who rarely praised anyone outside his social circle, finally spoke. "Whoever this person is, they certainly understand quality. It's refreshing to see someone with standards." He sipped his tea slowly, as if personally approving a stranger's life choices. My mother added, "It's admirable how they stay out of the spotlight. Some people don't need to make noise to be successful." She gave this comment a meaningful tone, unaware of how perfectly it fit the truth sitting across from her. The more they talked, the clearer it became. They were praising me without knowing it. They were celebrating work they assumed could never belong to someone like me. They were eager to meet the mind behind the brand, the one they believed existed in a different world entirely. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct them. I let their excitement build because it wasn't time yet. They weren't ready to understand how deeply they had misjudged me. Silas nudged my foot under the table, a small gesture telling me he knew exactly what I was thinking. Their admiration was honest, but it was also fragile. And soon, the truth that connected all of us, the truth they couldn't even imagine, would break that fragile illusion in a single moment. The afternoon sun rested softly on the surface of the infinity pool, making everything look peaceful even though the air around my family was anything but. They lounged on chairs as if they owned the place, drinks in hand, voices low and comfortable. I sat a little apart from them, enjoying the quiet, until Gemma shifted in her seat and pulled her hat lower over her eyes. She stared at me for a moment, then let out a long, dramatic sigh. "Your life must be so easy, Sloane," she said, as if she were stating a sad truth. "No real weight on your shoulders. No deadlines, no big decisions. You just drift along." Her tone wasn't angry, it was worse. It was full of pity, like she truly believed I had no direction, no ambition, nothing to worry about. She didn't see strengths or hard work. She only saw the version of me she had created in her own mind. Her words didn't sting the way they once would have. They didn't have the power to. What struck me instead was how confidently wrong she was, how comfortable she felt, assuming I had no real responsibilities. To her, my quietness equaled emptiness. It didn't occur to her that a person could move calmly through life because they were capable, not clueless. Carson joined in with a comment about how relaxing it must be to live without pressure. He didn't even look up from his phone. He said it casually, without thinking, as if my life were a long vacation rather than years of effort they knew nothing about. My father nodded in agreement. My mother made a soft noise, the kind she used when she felt sorry for someone. Their voices blended together, painting a picture of me as someone who floated through life without purpose or direction. I didn't correct them. I didn't argue or defend myself. There was no point. They weren't trying to understand me. They were trying to confirm what they already believed. Their opinions were built on assumptions, not reality, and I wasn't interested in fighting their imagination anymore. Across the pool, Silas watched me quietly. He didn't step in or call them out because he knew I didn't need saving. Instead, he gave me a look that asked a simple question: "Are you done?" He had seen this pattern before. He had watched me give them space, give them patience, give them room to show who they really were. I looked back at him and gave a small, steady nod. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was final. The moment had arrived. The act I had allowed them to perform, the one where they believed they were above me, where they thought they understood my life, had reached its end. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was simply ready. Ready to step out of the shadow they imagined I lived in. Ready to let the truth speak for itself. Ready for the moment that would rewrite everything they thought they knew about me. Carson kept talking like he was the most important person in the room. He complained about the minibar bill as if someone had personally tried to insult him. He made the same cheap joke he always used when he wanted attention, and the others laughed because they didn't know what else to do. I just sat quietly, letting his words roll past me. I didn't feel anger anymore. It was something colder, something steady. I wasn't there to argue. I was there to wait. Mr. Aldridge noticed the small signal I gave him. He didn't react, just continued wiping the decanter as if nothing unusual was happening. That was the kind of man he was: calm, controlled, and loyal to the truth. I trusted him to follow through when the moment came. I didn't need to look at him again. One sign was enough. Carson kept going, moving from complaints to stories nobody asked for. He wanted to guide every conversation back to himself. My family nodded along, pretending to care. They didn't notice how stiff the air had become or how I wasn't playing along. They never paid attention unless I raised my voice or made their lives easier. Today, I planned to do neither. The lounge was warm, quiet, and drowned in soft golden light. The clinking of ice, the low hum of conversations from other guests, the quiet shuffle of staff in the background, it all made the room feel calmer than it should have. A moment like this felt too peaceful for what was about to unfold, but maybe that was part of the point. Everything that had been hidden for years would surface not in chaos, but in quiet truth. My mother asked me if I was tired. She said it with a sweet tone that didn't match her eyes. She wanted me to look small again. I just told her I was fine. I think that bothered her more than anything I could have actually said. When you stop reacting, people who rely on your silence get nervous. Carson leaned back in his chair and smirked at me, like he thought he had control over the room. He didn't know that the people he ignored were already aware of what was coming. He didn't know the timing was set. He didn't know that the person he mocked was the only one who could change how the night would end. I watched the door for a moment. It wouldn't be long now. Mr. Aldridge stepped out from behind the bar and slowly approached our group. He wasn't hurried. He wasn't tense. He was simply moving with purpose. That was the sign. The next step was starting. I took a quiet breath and straightened in my seat. The moment I had prepared for, the moment they never believed would come, was finally here. Mr. Aldridge walked toward us with a calm, steady pace, the kind that made people straighten without thinking. Carson leaned forward, already convinced the attention was meant for him. He started talking before Mr. Aldridge even reached our table, waving his hand as if he were doing the man a favor by speaking. But Mr. Aldridge didn't slow down, didn't turn his head, didn't offer even the smallest acknowledgement. He simply passed him, stopping right in front of me. The room shifted. Not loudly, but enough for people nearby to notice something unusual. Mr. Aldridge gave me a respectful nod, the kind reserved for someone who mattered. His tone was clear, steady, and loud enough to reach the surrounding guests without sounding rude. He addressed me with confidence, like he already knew exactly how the next few minutes would unfold. He apologized for a small detail none of my family even knew existed. Then, he mentioned the private residence wing, a place only a handful of people even knew about. The words landed heavily. My family went still, trying to understand what he was talking about. They had always assumed I stayed where they stayed, that I lived in the same limited space they thought I deserved. They never imagined I had access to anything more. Carson looked confused for a moment, then tried to regain his confidence by laughing lightly. He waited for someone else to explain the situation, but no one did. Mr. Aldridge didn't look at him. His attention remained fixed on me as he asked whether he should transfer their room charges to the company account or attach them to my personal courtesy. It was a simple question, but the weight behind it changed everything. My mother blinked several times, unsure if she had heard correctly. My father sat back in his chair, his expression tightening. My sister looked from me to Mr. Aldridge, as if the words didn't line up with the version of me she had kept in her mind. None of them spoke. The silence was sharp. They wanted to ask how I had access to anything corporate, but they didn't know how to start without revealing their confusion. I answered calmly, telling Mr. Aldridge to place the charges under my courtesy. I kept my tone light, as if this was normal for me. He nodded once, accepted the instruction, and noted he would update the file immediately. No one else at the table moved. Carson tried to laugh again, but it came out thin. He asked Mr. Aldridge if this was some kind of mistake. Mr. Aldridge did not even pause. He simply replied that everything had been verified earlier and that all arrangements were correct. Then he stepped aside, waiting for any further instruction from me. The shift in the atmosphere was complete. They were no longer looking at him. They were looking at me, really looking, as if seeing something they had overlooked for years. I didn't explain anything. I didn't owe them that. I simply stood, letting them sit in the new reality they never saw coming. The room didn't explode with noise. It collapsed into stillness. Everything seemed to pause at once, as if someone had switched the world to slow motion. Carson's confident expression simply fell apart. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. He looked like someone trying to understand a language he had never heard before. Gemma's hand trembled, and her drink slipped. The glass hit the floor, scattering bright pieces across the rug. She didn't even react. She just stared at me, wide-eyed, like she no longer recognized the person sitting a few feet away. Franklin froze with his cigar halfway up, suddenly unsure whether to keep lifting his hand or set it down. Vivian made a soft, broken noise, one I had never heard from her before, shock mixed with something that might have been fear. The soft jazz filling the lounge grew louder only because no one else was speaking. Even the air felt different, heavier, tighter. I let the silence stretch long enough for each of them to feel it. I wanted them to sit in the moment they had created through years of assumptions and quiet disrespect. I met their eyes one by one. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show anger. Calmness carried more weight than any argument could. I gave Mr. Aldridge a simple instruction, no courtesy. I wanted every charge placed at full rate. My tone was steady and light, as if the decision was obvious. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about removing the illusion that they could label me however they pleased. He nodded once, accepting the direction without hesitation. I added that the Q2 acquisition reports should be sent up. The reaction around the table shifted yet again. Franklin lowered his cigar. His face tightened, unsure whether he had misheard me. Gemma blinked rapidly. Carson finally stirred, leaning forward like he could somehow catch the meaning if he focused hard enough. I mentioned my brother's professional interest, though the words were simple enough that even they understood the underlying message. They thought I needed guidance. They thought my world was small and my choices limited. In that single moment, they realized just how far removed their image of me was from reality. The tension in the room sharpened. It wasn't anger. It was realization, heavy and uncomfortable. They wanted to ask questions, but they couldn't form them. Every assumption they'd ever made about me had cracked at once. They had walked into this trip believing they understood everything. Now they weren't sure of a single thing. I didn't remain to watch them scramble for words. I stood slowly, letting the silence settle again. Their faces remained frozen in disbelief, each one processing a truth that had arrived far too suddenly. Nothing needed to be explained. They finally understood what they had never cared to see. The moment the truth settled, their confidence collapsed. Questions tripped over each other as they tried to make sense of everything. Carson kept shaking his head like he could undo what he'd heard. Gemma stared at me as though I had stepped out of a different world. My parents searched my face for some familiar version of me, but that version no longer existed. They wanted explanations, long stories, and chances to rewrite what had already been said through years of dismissive comments. I didn't feel the need to fill the space with answers. I had spent too many years trying to prove myself to people who never bothered to look beyond their assumptions. That part of my life was gone. I stood steady, not angry, just completely free. I told them the truth in the simplest words. They had shaped their opinion of me based on what they thought I didn't have. They had chosen this place to show off their success, never realizing I had built the very ground they were standing on. There was nothing more to say. Their reaction wasn't my responsibility, Mr. Arson. Aldridge waited quietly for my instruction. I asked him to make sure their stay was billed exactly as it should be, nothing removed, nothing softened. He nodded once with his usual calm, already understanding what I needed. Silas stepped to my side, his presence warm and grounding. I reached for his hand, and we walked toward the private entrance that led to the owner's wing. None of them followed. None of them called my name. They just stared, trapped in a moment they could not undo. I didn't look back. There was no reason to. My peace didn't come from their shock or the way their expressions had fallen apart. It came from finally stepping out of their shadow. I had built a life they never imagined, not for revenge, but for myself. Their disbelief could never take that away. As the door closed behind us, the noise of the lounge faded, and the quiet wrapped around me like something earned. They were still standing in the echo of their own prejudice, surrounded by the luxury they respected more than the people in their lives. They had spent years judging me without ever seeing me. Now they finally understood what had always been out of their reach. Not my money, not my success, but something far more costly to them, the chance to be forgiven. Was I wrong to walk away, or was choosing my peace the only real option I had left? Tell me your honest thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one.